The first stand the morning sky over Kepler-4 for to be burned orange when the ships arrived. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Mining Station Alpha, watching 12 massive vessels descend through the atmosphere like falling stars. Each one was the size of a city block, their hulls gleaming with an alien metal that seemed to drink in light, rather than reflect it. Sarah had been expecting this day for 3 months, ever since the first reports came in from the outer colonies. The Vorthan Empire was expanding, and they had a simple policy for every species they encountered: submit or be eliminated. So far, according to the scattered transmissions that managed to reach Earth, 17 different civilizations had chosen submission. Not one had chosen to fight. The communication came exactly at noon, local time. The voice that emerged from the station speakers was melodious, almost hypnotic, speaking perfect English with an accent that reminded Sarah of classical music. Greetings, humans of Kepler-4 for to be. I am High Commander Vexful of the Vorthan 7th Fleet. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for integration into our empire. You have 1 standard hour to surrender your weapons and prepare for relocation. Compliance will ensure your continued existence. Resistance will result in immediate termination. Sarah picked up the microphone with steady hands, though her heart was racing. Behind her, the command center had gone silent. Every technician, every officer, every civilian worker was watching her. She thought about the 50,000 people living in the mining complex below, families, children, people who had left Earth to build something better among the stars. High Commander Vexful, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the station. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Kepler Colonial Defense Force. We've received your message, and we have a response for you. She paused, looking out at the alien ships hovering in perfect formation above their small world. In her peripheral vision, she could see Dr. Marcus Webb frantically working at his engineering station, his fingers flying over holographic displays. Zara Rodriguez stood by the tactical console, her sniper rifle already assembled and ready. Our response is no. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. When the Vorthan commander spoke again, there was something different in his voice. Confusion, perhaps, maybe even surprise. You decline our generous offer of servitude. Perhaps you do not understand. Your species possesses no advanced weaponry. Your ships are primitive chemical rockets. Your defenses are non-existent. We have conquered civilizations far more advanced than yours without losing a single vessel. Sarah smiled grimly. Maybe that's your problem, Commander. You've been fighting civilizations. We're just people trying to protect our families. What happened next would later be analyzed by military historians across human space. The Vorthan, expecting either immediate surrender or a brief, futile resistance, sent down a single battalion of their elite troops. 300 soldiers in powered armor that could deflect particle beams and energy weapons. They landed in perfect formation at the main entrance to Mining Complex 7, their weapons powered but not raised. This was meant to be an occupation, not a battle. They walked directly into Dr. Webb's first surprise. Marcus Webb had been the chief engineer on Kepler 442b for 8 years. He understood mining equipment better than anyone in the sector. He also understood that mining equipment was designed to move massive amounts of rock and metal with precision and power. When the Vorthan troops stepped onto the reinforced platform outside Complex 7, Webb triggered a sequence he had been programming all morning. The industrial gravity manipulators, designed to lift 1,000-ton ore containers, reversed their polarity simultaneously. 300 elite alien soldiers, each weighing nearly half a ton in their armor, suddenly found themselves launched 200 meters into the air. The ones who survived the fall landed in the carefully prepared secondary trap. The mining laser array, normally used to cut precise channels in asteroid rock, had been recalibrated to track fast-moving targets. The Vorthen battalion was eliminated in less than 60 seconds. Hi, Commander Vexvel's next transmission was no longer melodious. You dare use treachery against the Vorthen Empire. Your death will be slow and ceremonial. Sarah was already moving. The command center had become a hive of activity as every person on the station implemented plans they had hoped never to use. Ghost, how many did we get? Zara Rodriguez was studying her tactical displays, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of multiple screens. All of them, Commander, but they're repositioning the fleet. Looks like they're done underestimating us. Dr. Webb looked up from his engineering station, sweat beating on his forehead. The industrial fabricators are online. I've got them producing shaped charges from the mining explosives. If we can get close to their ships, ... We're not going to get close to their ships, Sarah said. She was looking at the holographic display showing the positions of the Vorthen vessels. They had moved into a standard orbital bombardment formation. In about 20 minutes, the mining station would be reduced to molten slag. We're going to make them come to us. The next phase of Webb's preparation involved every mining transport on the surface. These were massive vehicles designed to haul or across the planet's rough terrain. They were also, as Webb had realized, perfect mobile weapons platforms. The mining transports began moving in coordinated patterns across the surface, each one now equipped with improvised missile launchers built from or processing equipment. When the Vorthen airstrikes began, they found targets that refused to stay still and hit back with surprising effectiveness. The aliens had energy shields that could deflect most projectiles, but mining charges were designed to shatter solid rock. When they exploded against Vorthen aircraft, the results were devastating. Sarah watched from the command center as the first Vorthen fighter crashed into the mountains east of the complex. Then a second, then a third. My God, whispered Lieutenant Torres, the station's communications officer. We're actually fighting them. We're more than fighting them, Zara said, her sniper rifle tracking another Vorthen aircraft. We're winning, but... Sarah knew better. They had surprised the aliens, caught them off guard, made them pay a price they hadn't expected. But the Vorthens had 11 more ships in orbit, and each one carried enough firepower to crack a planet. This first victory was just buying them time. High Commander Vexvel seemed to reach the same conclusion. His next transmission was cold and professional. Impressive, humans. You have managed to destroy several of our reconnaissance units, but you have also forfeited any chance of survival. We will now demonstrate why 17 civilizations chose submission over destruction. The bombardment, when it came, was unlike anything Sarah had ever imagined. Beams of coherent energy lanced down from orbit, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a city block. But the beams struck empty ground. The mining complexes, all 50,000 people living in them, had been evacuated into the deep tunnels that honeycombed the planet's crust. This was humanity's oldest tactic, refined over millions of years of evolution. When faced with a predator too large to fight, go underground and make them come after you. Dr. Webb had spent the last 3 months turning those tunnels into something the Vorthens had never encountered before. Every passage was rigged with motion sensors connected to mining charges. Every intersection had hidden weapons, positions built from industrial equipment. Every kilometer of tunnel was a potential death trap for anyone who didn't know exactly where to step. The Vorthon ground assault began at sunset. 5,000 elite troops, the finest warriors of an empire that had conquered half the galaxy, descended into the tunnels of Kepler-4 for to be. They carried weapons that could melt steel, and armor that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. They had never fought humans before. Sarah led the defense from Deep Station Charlie, a converted mining operations center 3 kilometers underground. She could track the enemy's progress through web sensor network, watching as Vorthon squads moved through passages that seemed empty and safe. Squad 7 just hit the first mine cluster, Zara reported, monitoring the tactical displays. Looks like we got about 30 of them. Squad 12 is in the maze section, Webb added. They're taking the wrong turn, right into the crusher array. Sarah listened to the distant rumble of explosions and collapsing tunnels. Every Vorthon soldier they killed down here was one less that would threaten human families. But she also knew that every explosion brought them closer to the moment when the aliens would realize what was happening. That moment came 3 hours into the battle. High Commander Vexvel's voice echoed through the communication system, and for the first time, Sarah heard something she recognized: fear. What are you doing down there? My soldiers are disappearing. Their life signs vanish without warning. This is not how civilized species conduct warfare. Sarah picked up the microphone one more time. Around her, the deep station hummed with activity. As humans prepared for the next phase of their desperate gambit, children helped load ammunition. Engineers programmed new trap sequences. Miners who had never held weapons in their lives checked improvised rifles built from mining tools. The price of defiance the war changed after that first day underground. High Commander Vexvel pulled his remaining forces back to orbit and did something unprecedented in Vorthon military history. He called for reinforcements, not just ships and soldiers, but specialists, experts in tunnel warfare and siege operations. The humans of Kepler-4 for 2B had become a problem that required the full attention of the Vorthon Empire. Commander Sarah Chen used the respite to consolidate their defenses and tend to their wounded. The casualty reports were sobering. They had lost nearly 1,000 people in the initial bombardment and tunnel fighting. Families torn apart, friends lost, dreams shattered by alien weapons that turned human bodies to ash in microseconds. But they had also accomplished something remarkable. In 18 hours of fighting, they had destroyed more Vorthon military assets than the previous 17 conquered civilizations combined. The aliens were learning that humans were different from anything they had encountered before. Dr. Marcus Webb worked without sleep for 3 days straight, converting every piece of mining equipment he could find into weapons of war. The ore processors became ammunition factories. The atmospheric processors became chemical weapon dispensers. The fusion reactors that powered the mining operation became the components for something much more dangerous. Sarah, you need to see this, Webb said, his eyes red with exhaustion but bright with desperate innovation. He led her to the deepest level of the complex, where the main fusion reactor hummed with barely contained energy. I've been studying the wreckage from their ships. Their shields operate on a specific harmonic frequency. If we can generate an opposing frequency at sufficient amplitude. Sarah looked at the massive reactor, understanding dawning in her eyes. Marcus, please, Tell me you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting. I'm suggesting we turn our reactor into the largest EMP device in this sector of space. It would knock out every Vorthan ship within 1,000 kilometers. Maybe give Earth enough time to prepare a real defense. And it would also kill everyone on this planet. Webb nodded grimly. Everyone in the complex, yes. But the miners in the outlying settlements might survive. And 50,000 lives too by Earth time to prepare for war. That's mathematics I can live with, or die with. Zara Rodriguez had been listening from the doorway. The sniper had lost her entire reconnaissance team in a Vorthan ambush the previous day, and her usual dark humor had been replaced by something harder and more focused. There might be another way, she said quietly, but it's going to require volunteers. Her plan was insane. It was also perfectly human. The Vorthon reinforcements arrived on the 5th day. 12 additional ships, including a massive siege vessel, designed specifically for cracking planetary fortifications. High Commander Vexfell had clearly decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. His first mistake was announcing his intentions over the planetary communication network. People of Kepler-4 for 2b, you have fought bravely, but your resistance ends now. We have brought siege weapons that will crack this planet like an egg. We offer you one final chance for surrender. Lay down your weapons and march to the surface. Submit to Vorthon authority, and your deaths will be quick. Sarah's response was broadcast not just to the Vorthon fleet, but on every emergency frequency used by human space. She wanted Earth to hear this. She wanted every human settlement in the galaxy to know what was happening on Kepler-4 4-B. High Commander Dexful, this is Commander Sarah Chen. We've heard your offer, and we have a counter-proposal. How about you take your ships and your empire and go back where you came from? Because we're done talking. From this point forward, every Vorthan who sets foot on this world dies. Every ship that enters our atmosphere gets shot down. Every demand you make gets answered with violence. You want this planet. Come and take it. What followed was a battle that redefined warfare in human space. Zara's volunteer force consisted of 37 people. Miners, engineers, maintenance workers, even a few teenagers who lied about their age to join. They called themselves the Shadows, and their mission was simple. Get to the surface, infiltrate the Vorthan siege positions, and cause as much damage as possible. They moved through service tunnels and mining shafts that had been sealed for years, carrying weapons that Webb had cobbled together from industrial equipment, plasma cutters that had been weaponized, excavation charges that had been converted into guided missiles, personal shield generators jury-rigged from or processing units. The Vorthans never saw them coming. The first siege cannon was destroyed at 0347 hours local time. Zara's team infiltrated the weapon emplacement and used mining charges to collapse the entire structure. The explosion was visible from orbit, a pillar of fire that rose 3 kilometers into the atmosphere. The second cannon fell 20 minutes later than the third. By dawn, the Vorthans had lost 6 of their 12 siege weapons to saboteurs who seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. High Commander Vexful's frustration was evident in his increasingly frequent transmissions. How are you doing this? Our sensors show no movement on the surface. Our patrols find nothing. Yet our weapons continue to explode. Sarah smiled as she listened from Deep Station Charlie. We told you, Commander, you're not fighting a civilization. You're fighting people who are protecting their families. People don't show up on your sensors because we know every rock, every cave, every hiding place on this world. This is our home. The siege continued for 2 more weeks. The Vorthans brought in atmospheric fighters, ground-penetrating sensors, even psychic trackers from allied species. Nothing worked. The humans of Kepler-4 for 2b had become ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before retaliation could be organized. But the cost was devastating. Of Zara's original 37 volunteers, only 12 were still alive. The underground complexes were running out of food and medical supplies. The fusion reactor was showing signs of instability from all the rigged modifications Webb had made to it. It was Dr. Webb who suggested the final gambit. "Sarah, I've been monitoring. They have fleet communications. They're not just frustrated, they're terrified. In 300 years of conquest, they've never lost this many ships to a single planet. Other species in their empire are starting to ask questions." Sarah studied the tactical displays. The Vorthan fleet had grown to 24 ships as more reinforcements arrived, but she could see patterns in their deployment that suggested something beyond military necessity. They're not just trying to conquer us anymore, she realized. They're trying to make an example of us. Exactly, which means they're going to keep escalating until they crack the planet itself. Unless, unless what? Webb's plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Instead of defending the underground complexes, they would evacuate everyone to the deepest mining shafts and then trigger a controlled collapse of the upper tunnel systems. The Vorthans, thinking they had finally breached human defenses, would pour troops into what appeared to be captured territory, and then Webb would detonate every fusion reactor on the planet. Simultaneously, the evacuation took 3 days, 50,000 people moving through tunnels that had been home for months, carrying only what they could pack in emergency cases. Children who had grown up playing in mining corridors were now helping to carry ammunition and medical supplies. Elderly miners who should have been enjoying retirement were manning communication stations and medical posts. Sarah walked through the deep station. Charlie one last time before the evacuation was complete. Every room held memories. The command center, where they had planned impossible victories. The medical bay, where Dr. Patel had saved hundreds of lives with surgical instruments made from mining tools. The mess hall, where families had gathered each evening to share what might be their last meals together. Zara found her there, looking at a wall display that showed the original colony roster. 50,000 names when they had arrived. Now, barely 42,000 remained. Having second thoughts, Commander. Every minute of every day, Sarah admitted. But not about fighting. About whether we're doing enough. The final battle began. At dawn on the 21st day of the siege, the Vorthans, convinced that human resistance was finally crumbling, launched their largest ground assault yet. 15,000 troops, supported by hovering gunships and mobile artillery, they poured into the tunnel systems like water into a broken dam. They found empty corridors and abandoned equipment, signs of hasty evacuation, computer terminals still glowing with data about human defensive positions. It looked like a complete victory. High Commander Vexful himself led the final push into Deep Station Charlie. He stood in the command center, where Sarah Chen had coordinated humanity's desperate resistance, studying the tactical displays that showed the locations of every human survivor. His victory was complete. The humans had finally been broken. That was when Dr. Marcus Webb triggered the fusion cascade. 17 reactors, scattered across 300 square kilometers of mining territory, detonated simultaneously. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. A brief new star that burned brighter than Kepler 442's sun for exactly 47 seconds. When the light faded, there was nothing left of the Vorthon ground force except radioactive particles scattered across a glass crater. High Commander Dexfel and his 15,000 elite soldiers had been instantly vaporized. The orbital fleet, caught in the electromagnetic pulse of the explosion, drifted powerless in space for nearly an hour before backup systems restored minimal functionality. But in the deepest mining shafts, protected by kilometers of solid rock and emergency life support systems, 42,000 humans were still alive. Sarah's final transmission was broadcast on every emergency frequency, sent by a communication system that Webb had specifically hardened against electromagnetic pulses. Her words would be received by Earth, by every human colony, by alien civilizations across the galaxy who monitored human radio transmissions. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Kepler Colonial Defense Force. To any human listening to this message, I want you to know that we held our ground, we protected our families, and we made them pay for every meter. The Vorthon Empire thought we would surrender like every other species they've conquered. Instead, we taught them that humans don't surrender. We fight, we adapt, we sacrifice for each other. And when we have nothing left but spite and determination, we find a way to win. She paused, looking around at the faces gathered in the deep shelter. Children and adults, miners and engineers, all of them bearing the scars of 3 weeks of war. All of them still alive because they had refused to give up. To the Vorthon Empire, if you're listening to this, you now know the price of threatening human families. You've learned what happens when you give us no choice but to fight. We destroyed your finest commander and your best troops with mining equipment and determination. Imagine what we'll do when we have time to prepare real weapons. The transmission ended, but its effects rippled across the galaxy. Within a month, 17 species that had submitted to Vorthon rule declared independence and began armed resistance. The human strategy of asymmetric warfare, of turning every civilian into a potential soldier and every tool into a weapon, spread to civilizations that had forgotten how to fight. On Earth, the Colonial Defense Force began the largest military build-up in human history. But they also began something else. A new training program based on the defense of Kepler 4 for 2b. They called it the Chen Protocol, and it was taught to every human settlement in the galaxy. The lesson was simple. Humans don't retreat, they don't surrender, and they never, ever stop fighting for their families. The war that began with 50,000 people in mining tunnels would eventually free half the galaxy. But it started with Commander Sarah Chen looking at alien ships in an orange sky and saying the most human word in any language: